crucial thing in that is when he says, he talks about there being so much beauty in the world, he's not talking about the bag dancing, he's talking about the recorded image of the bag dancing. Obviously when you see it up on the big screen like that, you see that it's very definitely a film of video footage. There is something about the recorded image, there is something about the way in which film works in that way that is, I think, radically different from theatre. But obviously, you know, your background is from there, and you now very successfully parlay careers in both areas. I mean, I just saw Winter's Tale and I sort of moved right next door to each other. How much are they disparate areas, and how much is the theatre something that's completely separate from the movies?
Well, I think that, you know, I've always felt that there were two totally different parts of my brain, you know, and two very different crafts, really. I think partly that was because I was so determined when I set out in movies to not make, you know, a filmed play. Yeah. You know, I haven't done any movie adaptations of plays, and you know, I've always steered clear of that. You know, and I was very determined to make a film, you know, like a film should be made, storyboarded it, and work with the best, you know, craftspeople. And I mean, you know, I look at that and I miss Conrad Hall. You know, I mean, I just think the lighting in that. I mean, if you have, I don't know, it's unbelievable lighting in that scene. Just the way that the light grazes the side of his face, the way that he has the light in his eyes, the way he lights Jane. They're in shade, and yet you feel the light in the room. It has such poetry and resonant. I don't know. I mean, he was a genius. You know, he's sadly no longer with us, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to make it, in a weird way, almost as far apart from theatre as possible. Mm-hmm. I've always felt that theatre is not the director's medium. I think theatre is the actor's medium, the writer's medium. I think film is a director's medium. I think you tell the audience where to look. I mean, you know, I instruct the audience, as it were, to look at that bag and not look at any faces. I mean, the first half of that scene is played on the bag, not on West Bentley, and there's only 4 shots in the sequence, you know, and it's a long sequence. And that, you know, I'm controlling that. There's another way of cutting that scene, which is totally and utterly different, having a totally different effect, scoring, etc. So everything about it is controlled, and I think that I was very aware of that. Weirdly, as I've gone on, I found it less interesting to be controlling at times. I think I will go. I mean, there's no question I'll make another movie that puts a higher value on visual beauty again. But I found it very releasing to treat the way we go much more like a play. Yeah. And much more because I think the danger of this style of filmmaking is that it can become very cool and very clinical, and the composition of shots robs some of the blood from the performances. You know what I mean? It becomes it's very, very controlled, and I was very controlling. I mean, you know, Wes wasn't allowed to move. You know, I said to Dora, you look down, you look at him, and I remember specifically, you reach over, you pick up his hand, you know, wait 2 beats, then kiss him. You know, I mean that. You know, that I was that precise about it. You know, and now it would be totally. Let's see how it naturally emerges, and let me watch what you're doing, and let me try and follow what you're going to do. Sure. It's a different way of doing it. So in a way, the long answer, the shorter answer is that I think as of the last 10 years, theatre and film work have become much closer together. I mean, you know, not to go into sort of generalisations about theatre and film anymore, but you know, theatre forces the audience to use their imagination. There is, you know, if there's a ball of 300 people, you're not going to see a ball of 300 people on stage. A film, if it says in the script 300 people at the ball, that's what you have to shoot. You know, unless you find a clever way of doing it, you're seeing it through the crack of the door, then you have to put on screen what is required. In theatre, you can suggest a ball with 300 people with a sound effect, or with a lighting effect, or with 5 people moving in slow motion. I don't know, but there are many, many ways of doing it. On film, there aren't so many, and I think that it engages you on a different level. Theatre.
Although I should say that in your production of Winter's Tale, exit pursued by a bear is not implied by a sound effect. It's actually something that looks like a bear, actually on stage, that chases them off.
Yeah. His name's Gary. He does look like a bear though, he's very good. He spent a lot of time with a bear specialist.
You're making this up.
No, it's not a real bear, obviously.
But it's, I knew that.
But for a very few minutes, you do think, is that a real?
Yes.
And a friend of mine said, when it first came on, I thought, where did they? Is that a bear? Did they get it from the zoo? Where did they get the bear? Is it on a lead? Is it going to run into the audience? And then because it's very, very dimly lit, and then you realise, of course, it isn't. But yes, I mean, sometimes, I mean, I can't remember who said it, but I think one of the great lines about the artist, without wanting to be pretentious, is your job is to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar, And sometimes a literal effect is called upon in the middle of a very poetic framework of a play, and it can shock you because you don't expect to see something so real within something that is basically poetic, and it works the other way around. You don't necessarily, in the case of this scene, expect to see something poetic in the environment of something that is generally so real, and that also goes for the scene at the end of Road to Perdition, and we talked about earlier today, at the end when Paul Newman is shot by Tom Hanks, which is treated, which is done really in complete silence and pull the sound out. So sometimes it's just to try to move stuff around, in order to make you see it in a new way. There's a great phrase, Clive James uses a great phrase in his first book of memoirs. It's something like, I realised, when he's talking about realising that he wasn't really supposed to be a serious writer, he says something like, all I've ever been able to do is to turn a phrase until it catches the light. And I've always thought that was a brilliant phrase because in itself it is, of course, an example of what he's talking about. Yeah. But what you're trying to do as a director often is to turn a moment until it catches the light. And it sometimes takes a lot of time, like in the case of this plastic bag, and sometimes it happens instantly and there's a happy accident and you can never predict it.
Let's look at a scene from early on in Road to Perdition, which in many ways brings a lot of the things you've been talking about together, the idea that the seeing things through the child's eyes, the idea of the extraordinary sort of orchestration of the shot in terms of your cinematographer, the lighting. This is a scene very early on which kind of sets up the rest of the action. I think we should probably talk about it after people have seen it. This is a scene from Road to Perdition.